Hello Feather Buzzers, Andrew James here with a Lightroom tutorial for you. Now I'm not going to do anything tricky or particularly clever, there may be any sort of techniques that you've not seen before. I just want to sort of have a look at a couple of things. One is to look at sometimes how you need to process an image where you've shot into the light and you've got quite a contrast range, but you just want to lighten it a little bit without making it look over the toply brightened, if you like, in the shadow area, because it doesn't look natural if you go too far with it. But also, I just want to show you, you may know this already, but there are a couple of ways where you can take the settings that you've dialed in from one image and put them into the second image quite easily. Now there's two ways you can do it. One way people tend to know, and we'll just briefly look at that, and there's another way which is a quick way of doing it, which actually I'm always amazed when people go, oh, I didn't know it did that. So if you're one of those people, I didn't know it did that, then you're going to find out. If you did know it did it, then brilliant. But let's deal with that in a little bit. So first of all, I've got one of the a couple of images here taken recently on the Camargue trip, as you can see, and it was from our session when we had beautiful evening light, and at one point we were getting the Camargue cowboys, the Guardians, to drive the horses back across the marsh towards us, and we were shooting back into the light, which gave us some really interesting pictures, but it was quite tricky. Now, if you look at this, I'm just going to show you the first image here. You can look here. I've exposed it. I haven't done anything to this image, so here's my histogram. So we're right over, as you see, I'm right over on the right. So if I just hover over the little triangle in the right-hand side of the histogram, you can see there's a little bit of red appearing up in the sky. So that shows there's a tiny little bit of highlight clipping, but not much. Despite the fact that I know for a fact that I was about plus 2/3 exposure compensation. That's often what I will do in these circumstances. I'll dial in some exposure compensation so that I don't have the area that would naturally perhaps silhouette isn't too silhouetted, or that would naturally underexpose, because you don't want it too far underexposed. And I've repeat this many times. You'll be surprised how much overexposure you can get away with, and I'd rather pull back a little bit of overexposure than drag detail out from the shadows. So that's the case on this one. And if we look at the second image here, a little bit darker because they've come a little bit more towards me. It's in the same sequence, so even though I've still got the plus 2/3 dialed in there, the actual kind of result is a little bit different because of where they are in the frame, etc. But I like that shot. There's a horse's backside over here, which we need to deal with, but we will deal with that. One of the things, obviously, when you're dealing with action, is you don't know what's going to happen, and you can't be too precise with your composition. So that's what processing is for. And it's the same with this one. Actually, not too bad this, but there's a few things that we need to do. So let's just work through this and see how we get on. And then there's a reason I've got the two images that I will deal with as we go. But let's just deal with this first image. So I've got that highlight clipping. Let's just take highlights back a little bit to deal with that, and if I hover over there, it's still there, so I'm just going to do it till I get rid of it. Yeah, there we go. So about 52, 51 has dealt with that perfectly. Yeah, that's good. Now I'm not worrying too much about having loads of detail in there. Who cares? I mean, that's not really the picture that I need. But I am going to put a very light grad over the top as well, just to give it a little bit of extra. So I'm not going to go too far. Something like that. What should we put it in? What should we dial in? I don't know, about. I don't need to go a full stop, something like about 80 odd, that'll do. 83. So that just gives us a little bit more, if you like, more detail there. There's a little bit of cloud up there we see coming through a bit more, but apart from that, it's all good. And now I'll just close that down. So grad down. And now I'm just going to do an overall shadow lift, okay? Now there are two ways that I can do this. I can just do a general one here, where I just push up the shadows across the whole side of it. I won't do too much. That's probably a bit too far. Something like plus 20 is all I need. 19 I've got there. 19, 20 is fine. The other option, if you didn't want to do that across the whole of the frame, would just be to get an adjustment brush like this, get it about the right size here, so it's just going to go across the horses and here, so we just brush over that bit there. Job done. And then if I hit the old letter O. You can see that's where we've gone with it, with when we show the pink on the masking. And then I just do exactly the same here, about 1920 with the shadow lift. In fact, I could probably go a little bit further because I've not kind of picked up anything else on that one. So maybe I'd go to about 30. But it is quite subtle, and it's intended to be subtle. It's not supposed to be anything more than that. I'm not trying to get detail out of the guy in the background here because the detail's lost. You know, he is in shadow. It's quite natural for that to be lost. So that's all I do there. I'm just going to close down the adjustment brush. Now, clearly, as I said, you don't get your composition absolutely perfect when you're shooting action like this, thundering towards you. And I was sort of you just sort of, they start further back and they get towards you, and you hope for the best with it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is my favorite, which is the transform area. And first thing I can see, I've got a slightly not level, so I'm just going to deal with that. If you struggle to see that whether it's level or not, I know you can click the level here, but it doesn't always work that. So actually what I prefer to do is just click on the crop tool. I'm not going to use the crop tool, but when you click on the crop tool, it leaves transform open, and then you can just line it up either with a grid or with a thirds, whatever you've got there, just that line. So I can see from that line it's still not quite vertical. I'm just going to use that thirds line just to line that side up. That's good. Okay, now I can get rid of that. I'm going to do that by hitting R. That's perfect. Now I've got a little bit of white showing because I've gone outside the border area. So now I just need to scale, and I'm actually going to scale in a little bit more because I think it needs tightening up. I don't need quite so much around, and then I'm going to play around with the Y offset here because I quite like I like that reflection at the bottom. So I'm just going to bring that back up until that's perfectly in. That will do about there. I think, well, it's not too bad, is it now? So let's just go back to the basic tab, and all I'm going to do is just dial in a little bit of clarity to give it a little bit of nice edge to it. A little bit, about 11 will do on that, and then I'll make a decision. Have I done enough? Particularly thinking about the shadows lift, and I think maybe I did the adjustment brush shadow lift. So what I'm just to do is just a little global adjustment shadows lift as well. So it'll only be about 10 or 11. These are really subtle changes. Nothing I'm doing is heavy-handed at all, and that's really important. Now, at this point, I'm thinking, okay, I'm quite happy with that. I don't think there's any major issue. I could look at maybe warming it up a little bit more. I've got as shot at the moment. That'll be daylight. So if I go to daylight, yeah, no change whatsoever. If you're shooting in these conditions and you're shooting raw, daylight is usually give you the most accurate results. Remember, if you can warm it up by going to cloudy or shade, or you can go further if you just want to do it by custom in Lightroom itself or Adobe Camera Raw. But I think generally that's about enough. I'm going to add a tiny hint of vibrance as well, just to give it that extra kick, perhaps, rather than going to a warmer white balance. And I'm just going to take saturation back a fraction because I think sometimes that can help too. So maybe about 8, something like that. So that's not bad. So that's good. Now, as I said, we've done all that, and now we've got another image here. So I'm just going to click onto our other image. And it's very similar in terms of the tones and the way I'd want to process it. So I could take a lot of the stuff from the first image and I could then paste those settings into the other image. Now, if I do that the obvious way, because we have a copy and paste button over here, so if I click on copy, I'm going to get all everything's ticked here. I've got it's all checked up, got everything. I haven't done all of this. So what I could either just copy it, because it doesn't matter if it hasn't done it, and I could go through it, or I could decide I don't want to do all the bits. But it's a kind of, it's not complicated, but it's a slightly more like, oh, do I need that? Don't I need that? So let's just forget about copy and paste. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that Because the other thing that we can do, which is a lot simpler in many ways, because I just want to take exactly what I put in there, everything that I've just dialed into this image, I now want to apply to our second image. It won't be perfect when having done that, but we can still tweak it, of course. So I'm just going to, all I'm going to do, once I clicked on this and I'm in the develop module, as you can see, I'm just going to click on previous. So if I click on previous button down here at the bottom right hand side, there we go, it's just doing something, and there you can see that it has applied all those settings that we dialed in. So we've got our highlights have been dialed back, shadows, we should have yep, there we go, we've got a grad in there, exactly the same, just close that down again, there we go, clarity, etc, etc. So, and it's not done a bad job at all. Clearly, it's also done our transform for us, but it's not going to be perfect because it's a slightly different composition. So I think I would probably just scale that up a little bit more, and then move that across using the X offset, and then I would move that up as well, so I get a bit more that nice bottom area in there, something like that, and it's pretty close. And the only other thing I would do here is I'd just go back to basic, and I don't think this shadows lift is quite enough for this image, so I'm just going to push that up a little bit more, not a huge amount, but I'd say about 30, something like that, and then it's done. That's it. I didn't have to work through all the other bits and pieces because it was in the same ballpark area. Actually, something's just annoying me here. Sorry, I've got to go back. It's when you're doing these on here, you don't notice everything. So I'm now just want to just pull that across. I want a bit more of that nice splash coming up because I think that works on that right hand side. So I'm going to move those horses on the left across a bit, but they've still got plenty of room to move into. So that is it. It's really subtle when you get these things right, when you're doing these in the right way. It's not, you don't want to be heavy-handed in Lightroom, you don't want to be heavy-handed in anything really. You want to make those subtle differences, and it makes all the difference. But if you didn't know what this previous button is for, and trust me, lots of people don't know that because I get asked it sometimes, what does this do? And in fact, I actually genuinely had a letter for my digital camera thing, somebody asking about what it does, because they tried it and nothing happened. So I don't know why nothing had happened. They clearly previously not, when they clicked on it or tried clicking on it, done any developing on anything else, or it would put all the settings in. But it's simply, I think it'd been better if they'd called this paste, but of course they couldn't call it paste because they've got copy and paste over here, which gives us the tick box of all the different things. So they've called it previous. So it's previous because it's your previous settings put in there. But I think often people think it's connected to the reset button that it's next to. So it's like reset and then previous. But what does previous do? Anyway, there you go. Now you know if you hadn't tried that. Previous is a quick paste from the previous settings. And if you have a whole load of images, that you can take the settings from one image and apply to the other, and then you only need to do a few extra little tweaks. It'll speed your processing up, and that can't be a bad thing. That's all for now. See you later.